All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into contemplative education in schools today.
Oh yeah, this should be a good one.
This one should be really interesting. We are talking about meditation, and you know how meditation interventions are actually impacting students.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this whole idea of like meditation has really kind of been getting into schools more and more these days.
It does. You see it everywhere, and it's not just like a fad or something. It's like really connected to this concept of contemplative education.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean? CE.
CE, yeah, exactly. And I kind of think about it like a way to like almost help students have richer inner lives. Help them become more aware, have insights, even more compassionate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Roser and Peck, they described it, I think it was back in 2009, as like nurturing these forms of awareness in students,
Hmm.
forms that help them be more motivated to learn, and even just in their life in general, more freedom and transcendence.
Right. So it's not just sitting there being quiet.
Right.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's definitely deeper than that. And Chano, he added in 2012 that it's learning that's like infused with
Yeah.
this experience of awareness and
Wow.
insight and compassion, like you were saying,
Yeah.
not just for yourself, but for other people. And it's honed through these practices like sitting meditation and other things like that.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that these practices, as Jennings pointed out in 2008, can help students, kind of process information in new ways
Absolutely.
and gain a deeper understanding of themselves.
Yeah.
So, like, you can really see there's like an intention behind, bringing this into education.
It's
It's
it.
not just like, oh, let's have the kids be quiet for a few minutes.
Right, right. It's much more deliberate than that.
Yeah. So, to really dive into the evidence of this, we are going to be looking at a review from Waters and colleagues in 2015 called Contemplative Education, a systematic, evidence-based review of the effect of meditation interventions in schools.
Okay, great.
This is a systematic look at 15 different peer-reviewed studies.
15. That's a good amount.
Yeah. So this should give us some solid evidence looking at the impact of these programs in schools. So what were the main things they were looking at?
Well, they really honed in on these three, you could say, crucial areas for, how students develop. One was their overall well-being.
Okay.
Another was their social competence, like,
Yeah.
how well they navigate social situations and stuff.
Yeah.
And then obviously their academic achievement.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know how that's affected.
Of course. Yeah.
So across the 15 studies, they had data from over 1,700 students, 1,797 to be exact, and they looked at 76 different measures.
Wow. 76 different ways to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty comprehensive.
To see if it was making a difference or not.
But
So what did they find? What was the big picture? Did it seem like it was having an effect?
yeah, so the main thing they found, I mean, the big takeaway was that in about 61% of those 76 measures they looked at, meditation actually showed a statistically significant effect on at least one of those three areas.
Oh, okay.
So the majority of the time, something was happening.
Something was happening.
Now, the strength of those effects, that varied. It ranged from like small to medium,
Okay.
and then in some cases, it was actually large effects. So, that gives us kind of an idea of how strong of a difference it was making.
Okay. So, it's not a guarantee that it's going to have a huge impact, but in a lot of cases, it does seem to have at least some kind of positive influence. And I know the review touched on why that might be, focusing on things like cognitive functioning and emotional regulation.
Yeah, exactly. They basically propose this idea that, meditation might help students succeed by kind of boosting their cognitive functioning. So things like their attention, how they learn, their memory, all of that. And also by, improving how well they can regulate their emotions, like how well they can manage their feelings and reactions and stuff.
Yeah. And this is where it gets really interesting because, just knowing that it might help isn't enough.
Right.
We have to look at like what the evidence actually says.
Exactly.
So we're going to go through each of those three outcomes now, starting with well-being. I mean, it seems like the importance of well-being alongside, academics is becoming more and more clear in education.
Absolutely, yeah. People are really realizing that well-being is like a crucial foundation for successful learning and, just developing overall.
Yeah.
So this review, they looked at 9 studies on well-being, over 1,400 participants.
Oh.
And they had, 17 different outcomes that they were looking at.
Yep.
Things like, anxiety, stress, depression, optimism, even how students see themselves,
Okay.
self-care, all that.
Yeah.
And once again, the majority of the time, about 59% of those outcomes showed statistically significant effects.
Mm.
But the effect sizes were mostly, small to medium,
Yeah.
ranging from 0.02 up to 0.62.
Okay, so it'd be great to get some like specific examples of what this looks like, what kind of studies were showing, these positive changes.
Yeah, so one study that I thought was really interesting was from 2005
Okay.
by Napoli and his colleagues. And they looked at first and third graders.
Okay.
And what they found was that, using mindfulness, like, paying attention to your breath and doing these body scan meditations where you like focus on different parts of your body,
Okay.
those kids had a significant reduction in their self-reported anxiety compared to kids who just did quiet reading.
Okay.
So what's interesting is that it wasn't just like zoning out, you know. The meditation was like a more active way for them to reduce their anxiety.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
That makes sense. It's like intentional. It's not just passive.
Exactly, yeah.
So what about older students?
Yeah, so there was another study from 2001 by So and Orem Johnson. They worked with high school students, and they found that the students who practiced transcendental meditation, TM, you've probably heard of that.
Yeah.
Those students had significantly lower anxiety levels compared to students who took a nap or were just in like a control group.
Okay.
And this wasn't just like in the moment anxiety,
Oh.
It was like their overall tendency to be anxious was lower.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then another study, Broderick and Metz, in 2009, they saw a pretty decent-sized reduction in negative feelings among adolescents who practice mindfulness compared to a control group as well.
Okay.
So it seems like meditation can really help students kind of, manage their difficult emotions.
So it helps them, dial it down when they're having a rough time.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what about, more serious challenges, like if kids are having like emotional difficulties or maybe even feeling depressed?
Right. So there was a study in 2010 by Joyce and colleagues, and they found that after a 10-week mindfulness program, the number of kids who were like categorized as having these like borderline or abnormal emotional problems actually decreased significantly.
Wow.
Yeah. And even depression. There was a significant drop in that as well.
That's pretty powerful,
Yeah.
especially if they're having these more serious concerns.
Yeah. It's definitely really important to be able to address those.
Yeah. And it wasn't just, researchers observing these changes, right?
Right.
What did the students themselves say?
Yeah. So Campi and Rocco, in 2009, they did this study where they actually like talked to the students. And a lot of them said that they felt less stressed after they meditated. And almost half of them said that they actually started using meditation outside of school when they felt stressed.
Okay.
So they were actually applying it to their lives. And then Wall, he did another study in 2005. And in his study, he used a combination of mindfulness and Tai Chi and some Zen practices.
Yeah.
And the students in his study reported all these amazing improvements, like they felt better overall, they were calmer, they were sleeping better, they were even taking better care of themselves
Wow.
and feeling more connected to nature. It was really fascinating.
That sounds like such a comprehensive approach.
It was, yeah, it was very holistic.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, no, not all the findings were like completely positive.
Okay.
There were some studies where, the results were a little bit more mixed.
Okay.
So like, for example, Mendelsohn and colleagues in 2010, they didn't find a difference in the general moods of like 4th and 5th graders after they practiced mindfulness.
Okay.
But they did see significant reductions in like, how emotionally aroused the students felt when they were in stressful situations
Okay.
and how often they had intrusive thoughts bothering them.
Okay.
And even like how much they tended to dwell on things or like ruminate. So even if like their overall mood didn't like, completely change, it seemed like they were able to cope with the negative stuff better.
Right. So maybe they weren't feeling like, ecstatic all the time, but they were able to manage the negativity better.
Yeah, exactly. They had better tools.
Yeah. So what about, those more positive aspects of well-being, like feeling optimistic, having a positive self-image?
Right. So Schonert, Reichel, and Lawler in 2010, they found some small but significant improvements in like optimism and positive affect in pre-adolescents.
Okay.
But their findings about self-concept, those were kind of mixed. It seemed like it depended on the student's age.
Okay.
And then Huppert and Johnson in the same year, they didn't find strong group differences in resilience or like general well-being in these older adolescent boys. But they did find that the boys who meditated more frequently outside of class, like on their own, they said they felt better overall.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it seems like the impact on well-being is not like a simple thing,
Yeah.
It seems like it's more consistent at helping to reduce those negative things.
Okay, so it's like a buffer against the bad stuff. more than like, a booster of the good stuff.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But there was another study by Rosian and Ben in 2006 that I thought was really interesting. This was a qualitative study, so, it's not like numbers and stats.
Okay.
They were talking to 7th graders, minority students, who have been practicing TM for over a year. And these students, they talked about having better emotional regulation, like they were more self-reflective, they had more self-control,
Okay.
and they were experiencing less stress.
Okay.
One student even said they felt calmer and a better listener, which is a nice transition to our next topic.
It is, yeah. Because being a good listener, that's a big part of social competence.
Absolutely.
So what did the review find about meditation and how it affects, how students interact with each other?
So they looked at 6 studies on this with about 776 participants, I believe.
Yeah.
And they had 6 calculated effect sizes focusing on different aspects of social competence.
Okay.
And in this area, only about a third of the effects were statistically significant, so 33%.
Okay.
And these were mostly small effects,
Okay.
although there were a couple of large ones, ranging from 0.08 to 1.27.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah. So it seems like the impact on social competence, maybe wasn't quite as strong as what we saw with well-being.
Yeah.
But there were still some interesting findings.
Okay, so what kind of social skills were they looking at in these studies?
So Schonert, Reichel, and Lawler, their 2010 study, remember that one?
Yeah.
They found some really strong improvements
Okay.
in how teachers rated the social and emotional competence of the students who did mindfulness.
Okay.
And that effect size was huge, 1.27, so that was pretty noteworthy.
Yeah.
And then Joyce and colleagues, in their 2010 study, they found that teachers noticed their students being more relaxed and settled in class after mindfulness sessions,
Okay.
which, that suggests that maybe there was a reduction in disruptive behavior,
Yeah.
which is really helpful for everybody in the classroom.
Oh, yeah. A calmer classroom is good for everyone.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So then Napoli and colleagues in 2005, they reported that teachers noticed fewer, ADHD-type behaviors in the students who meditated.
Okay.
And then going back to that study where they interviewed the students, Campion and Rocco, some students said that mindfulness helped them to manage their anger better,
Okay.
which, then they have better friendships and interactions.
Yeah.
And the teachers in that study, they also said that they saw fewer fights and just more positive behavior overall. One teacher even said, and I quote, "I found straight away that they deal better with each other than other times."
That's great. So, the teachers are noticing it, the students are noticing it. That's really good.
Yeah, it's really cool when it all lines up like that.
Yeah.
And then in Rosan and Ben's 2006 study, the students were saying things like, meditation made them nicer, more mature, better at listening, and even less likely to start arguments.
Okay.
One student said, and I quote, like, "I'm more nicer and mature, like I can listen to them."
That's great.
So yeah, even though the quantitative data showed mostly small effects, the numbers,
Yeah.
the qualitative stuff, like what the students were actually saying, it really pointed towards some positive changes in how they relate to each other.
Right. So it might be subtle, but it's there.
Exactly, yeah. It's in those everyday interactions.
Yeah. Okay. So the review also highlighted a trend that when teachers were the ones leading the meditation, it seemed like it had a bigger impact.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Like the teacher-student relationship really plays a role.
Yeah.
So in those cases where teachers were the facilitators, 75% of the effects were statistically significant. But when other people led it, it was only 20%.
Oh, wow. That's a big difference.
Yeah. So that's something to think about.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to academic achievement, which is always a big concern for people.
Yeah, right.
I mean, with this hope that doing things like meditation can lead to better grades.
Yeah.
So what did the review find in that area?
So this is where the review really highlighted that we need a lot more research.
Okay.
They only found 3 studies that specifically looked at meditation and academics. And they were only able to calculate effect sizes for 2 of those studies.
Okay.
But those effect sizes ranged from 0.44 to 0.83.
Okay.
So, there were small, medium, and large effects.
Okay.
But only 3 studies.
Yeah. That's not a lot to go on.
No, not really.
So what did those few studies find?
So one study, it was from 1989 by Nedich and Nidich. They found that younger students who practiced TM had increases in things like reading skills, vocabulary, language abilities, study skills.
Okay.
And then the older students, they had improvements in social studies, understanding literary material, reading comprehension, quantitative thinking, all after these really short 12-minute TM sessions.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then more recently, in 2011, Nidich and colleagues, they found really strong improvements in English and math scores on the California Standards Test.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this was for 6th and 7th graders.
Okay.
And they only did TM twice a day for 12 minutes for 3 months. And they had a control group. So these results were actually pretty good.
Yeah, those sound pretty promising, especially that more recent one,
Yeah.
where they actually had a control group to compare to.
Yeah, exactly. And then Rosota and Ben in 2006, their study was qualitative. They were interviewing students. But a lot of students said that they felt like their academic performance had improved. And they said it was because they felt more restfully alert from doing TM.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there are some positive things out there, but
Yeah.
honestly, we need more research to really know for sure.
Yeah, we can't say definitively whether meditation improves academic achievement in schools based on this, limited research.
No, not yet. But it's definitely an area that deserves more attention.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've looked at the potential effects,
Right.
but let's dive into the why. The review, they proposed this model, the school-based meditation model,
Okay.
to try to explain, how meditation might be working, to cause these outcomes.
Yeah.
What are like the main ideas in this model?
So there's two main ideas. The first one is that meditation can positively impact student success
Mm-hmm.
by improving cognitive function, like we were talking about before. Their attention, memory, all that.
Okay.
And the second is that it improves those outcomes by, helping with emotional regulation.
So the idea isn't that, the meditation technique itself is what's directly leading to better grades or fewer arguments. It's more that it strengthens these underlying mental skills and emotional skills.
Right, exactly. It's like building those foundational skills.
Yeah, and then that leads to these good things happening. Exactly, yeah. It's all connected. And this model, it comes from 3 different areas of research. So first, educational research has shown that, cognitive function and emotional regulation really are connected to student success.
Okay.
And then second, we've got neuroscience research on adults that's shown how meditation can change the brain, like literally the structure and function of areas in the brain that are involved in these processes.
Okay.
And then third, there's research specifically on contemplative education, that's shown improvements in both of these things in students who do meditation.
Yeah. That makes sense. If you can focus better and manage your stress, it makes sense that it would have, a ripple effect
Right.
on your learning and how you interact with other people. But the paper does mention that, these pathways are still somewhat theoretical,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about kids. Right. Because we don't have a ton of neuroscience research on kids' brains and how meditation affects them specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So the model's kind of making an educated guess, based on what we know from adults.
Yeah. Okay.
But that guess is supported by, seeing improvements in students in those school programs.
Okay, so let's unpack that first part of the model, the connection between meditation and how well our brains work.
Okay.
So why are those cognitive skills, so important for students in the first place?
Well, cognitive skills are basically how we learn. It's things like how well you pay attention, how fast you process information, how much you can hold in your memory, how easily you can switch between tasks, all that.
Okay.
And those skills, they're essential for taking in new information, really understanding it, and then remembering it later. But it's not just about school,
Yeah.
being able to focus your attention and control your impulses. That can also help you be happier and healthier because you're not so reactive.
Right. It all comes back to the mind-body connection.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how does meditation affect those cognitive functions in adults?
So the research has shown that meditation can actually change the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's really involved in attention, concentration, and managing your emotions.
Okay.
And meditation is also connected to specific brainwave patterns.
Okay.
Like when people meditate, they tend to have more theta and gamma wave activity, which those are linked to better focus and more complex thinking.
Okay.
There's been some really interesting studies using EEG,
Okay.
like Aftanas and Glowacaki in 2001 and Lutz and colleagues in 2004. They've shown these brain changes in long-term meditators.
Okay.
And Logopoulos and colleagues in 2009, they found that theta and alpha waves, they actually increased during a type of meditation called ASIM meditation,
Okay.
which suggests that people are relaxed but still focused.
Yeah, like a calm focus.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like, meditation is a workout for your brain, specifically the parts that are important for being focused and clear-headed. So what's the evidence that these benefits are actually happening in students, when they meditate in school.
Right. So the review, they found 7 studies, and they involved over 1,200 students. And the great thing was that 73% of those studies, they showed improvements in some aspect of cognitive functioning.
Okay.
So that's a good chunk of them,
Yeah.
though most of the effects were small to medium.
Okay.
But for example, there was a study in 2011 by Bejal and colleagues, and they found that older adolescents who did a type of meditation called concentrative meditation, those kids, they were better at tasks that required, staying alert and being able to deal with conflicting information.
Okay.
And then you remember Shomert Reichel and Lawler's 2010 study. They found significant improvements in attention and concentration in those 4th to 7th graders who did the mindfulness program.
Great.
And then in 2005, Napoli and colleagues, they saw improvements in attention in both 1st and 3rd graders. And those improvements were reported by both the teachers and the students themselves.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the qualitative data from Campi and Rocco's study, a lot of students in that study said it was easier to concentrate on their schoolwork. One student even said, and I quote, more focusing, but not like hyper.
So it's like a calm focus.
Yeah, exactly. A more relaxed and sustainable kind of focus.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like across different ages, different types of meditation, attention does seem to improve.
Right.
What about other skills like memory or how fast they process information?
So in Orm Johnson's 2001 study, remember that when they were using TM?
Yeah.
They found that the high school students in their study actually improved their fluid intelligence.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And they got faster at processing information. They also improved their practical intelligence and even their creativity.
Wow. So a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And then Warner in 2005, he did a study where he found that students who practiced TM, they had better working memory. They could hold more information in their minds. They were more flexible. Like they could switch between tasks more easily.
Okay.
And they were more reflective.
Okay.
They also did better on tasks that measured their understanding of these conservation principles, which is kind of a complex cognitive skill.
Okay.
And what was really interesting is that the longer the students had been practicing TM, the better they did on some of those tasks.
So again, practice makes a difference.
Absolutely, yeah. Just like with anything. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah. So what about those executive functions? The ones that are like about planning and organizing and managing your time.
Right, so Fluke and colleagues in 2010, they looked at how mindfulness practices, or MAPs, affected the executive functions of younger elementary school kids. And they didn't find overall group differences. But they did see that students who started out with lower scores in things like metacognition, thinking about your own thinking and attention regulation, those students, they improved more.
Interesting. So it might be especially helpful for kids who are struggling in those areas.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it helps to level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so are there any patterns, when it comes to what type of meditation was used, how long the program was, or who taught it?
So the review did point out a few things. First, TM seemed to have more positive and significant effects on cognitive function than mindfulness or programs that used a mix of things.
Okay.
And then programs that lasted longer than 24 weeks and involved practicing more than once a day, those also seem to lead to bigger benefits.
Okay.
And high school students tended to have more cognitive benefits than younger kids. And then, just like we saw with social competence, when teachers led the meditation, it seemed to be more effective.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like there are some trends, but it's probably a combination of factors.
Right. Yeah. You can't really isolate one thing and say that's the only reason. It's probably a complex interplay of all these different things.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to the second part of the model, the connection between meditation and emotional regulation.
Okay.
So why is being able to regulate your emotions so important for students in the first place?
Well, being able to regulate your emotions, that's essential for being happy and healthy.
Yeah.
If you have trouble managing your emotions, you're more likely to be stressed, anxious, even depressed. And there was this study by McCratty and colleagues in 1999. They taught emotional regulation techniques to middle schoolers, and it actually helped them manage their stress and anger better.
Okay.
So it's not just about how you feel inside, it's also about how you behave.
Yeah, it affects how you interact with other people.
Absolutely. And research has shown that emotional regulation is really closely linked to social competence. Things like empathy, being able to control your mood when you're around other people, and just being helpful and kind.
Right. Right.
And there was a long-term study, Eisenberg and colleagues in 1995, and they found that kids who were better at emotional regulation when they were younger, they actually developed better social skills over time.
Okay.
So it really lays the groundwork for good social development.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the connection to schoolwork, right?
Right.
It's really hard to focus and learn when you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious.
Yeah, absolutely.
And studies have shown that emotional regulation is linked to doing well in school, from kindergarten all the way up to college. And this is true even when you take into account things like IQ and just overall how smart you are. Yeah, it's really important. And a big study in 2011 by Durlak and colleagues, they found that social emotional learning, which includes emotional regulation, it's really connected to academic achievement. So
Okay.
basically, being able to manage your emotions helps you learn better, handle stress, and not give up when things get tough.
Okay, so if meditation can improve emotional regulation, then it makes sense that it would have all these good knock-on effects.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a domino effect. So how does meditation affect emotional regulation in the brain?
Yeah, how does it work?
Well, neuroscience research shows that meditation can increase activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. That's a part of the brain that's involved in processing emotions, feeling empathy, and dealing with inner conflict.
Okay.
And studies also found that people who meditate a lot, their ACC is actually thicker, and they have more gray matter in their hippocampus, which is another part of the brain that's important for emotional regulation and memory. And then on the flip side, meditation has been linked to less activity in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's like your fear center.
Yeah.
That's what triggers your fight or flight response.
Right, right.
So it's almost like meditation is strengthening the parts of your brain that help you understand and manage your emotions while also calming down the parts that make you stressed out.
Yeah, so you're kind of turning up the good stuff and turning down the bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a rebalancing act.
Yeah.
So the big question is, does this actually translate to better emotional regulation in students?
Yeah, are we seeing that in schools?
So the review looked at 6 studies that focused on that, and they found that about 41% of the time, there was a significant positive effect.
Okay.
So for example, Broderick and Metz in 2009, they found that teenagers who did mindfulness, they said they were more aware of their emotions, and they were better at processing stressful thoughts.
Okay.
And then Schonert, Reichel, and Lawler in 2010, they saw less aggression and oppositional behavior in kids who did mindfulness. And Mendelsohn and colleagues in 2010, they found improvements in things like rumination and intrusive thoughts, and how easily students got upset in stressful situations.
Okay, so again, the students themselves are reporting these changes.
Right. And it's not just them.
Yeah.
Borozan and Ben in 2006, they found that.